Good morning. This is episode 90, March 21st, 2019. I'm Philip Koerper. This is the Philip Koerper Show. I had a fun conversation with some of my friends about this Ethiopian airline crash. This is really, truly amazing. I think people really forget that close to 90% of all plane crashes, commercial plane crashes, or even private pilot plane crashes, are pilot error. And this makes sense to us. As I debated this, car crashes. How many car crashes occur because something broke down, that the brakes failed or the throttle got stuck? Remember that big, huge Audi scandal decades ago, where now we all have locks on our transmissions because of that scandal, and they said that these cars had inadvertent acceleration. That turned out to be totally false and almost bankrupt the Audi manufacturers. And so this idea that planes usually break down and cause the plane crashes, it's really not true. Just about all plane crashes are pilot error. Fox News has got a story today. Ethiopian Airline pilots of doomed flight didn't take training on the 737 MAX simulator. So it's really, people don't really, the elephant in the room is that Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines, these airlines have horrific safety records. And why do they? Well, the pilots, these pilots couldn't even speak English barely to get back when they said they were having problems after takeoff. So this is to immediately blame Boeing and the blame the number one selling commercial aircraft in the world right now, the 737 MAX, is really retarded. And like I've said before, if this was an Airbus, it never would have been grounded. Okay, this is very political, extremely political. And so the Lion Air crash, Lion Air, as I said before, couldn't even fly in the EU until like 2015. They're terrible safety record. Ethiopian Airlines have had 67 fatalities, I think, since like 1965, fatal plane crashes, where Delta has had 5. Delta Airlines has had 5 in the same period of time. So anyhow, we'll probably never even know. It looks like the Ethiopian Airlines, they do have the black box. I don't know if we're ever going to really figure this out. American investigators arrived in Ethiopia, but they quickly left because the whole scene had been contaminated. So to get to the bottom of these crashes is going to be very difficult. But to blame it on the plane immediately is ridiculous. Now, Boeing's probably going to do a few changes and stuff to try to settle the fears of people. People get very superstitious at things like this. People are very superstitious of flying. They feel like it's so dangerous. This is really just truly not true. I'm looking here at the National Transportation Safety Board. So they publish at ntsb.gov accidents involving passenger fatalities. United States Airlines, and part 121 is from 1982 to the present. So when would you guess the last fatal plane crash was with United States Airlines? Well, it was in 2009. It was 10 years ago. It was Colgan Air. It was that Bombardier DHC-8 plane crash where 45 people were killed. The fatal passenger crash before that was in Lexington, Kentucky in 2006. That plane crash was really sad for our community. We had just moved to Lexington, Kentucky a year before that crash, where the pilots took off. The Bombardier, it was a CRJ 100. Did the plane break during that crash? Or the Colgan Air crash? Oh no. No, the pilots were yakking it up in Lexington, and they took off on the short runway instead of the long runway. And they didn't realize it until like it was too late. And they tried to take off anyhow, and they crashed the plane. They couldn't. They ran out of runway, and the plane crashed. Everyone was killed except the co-pilot in that plane crash. It was horrible. I knew people who had friends and family members. I knew people who had family members on that flight. It's very, very, very devastating for the Lexington community. But you can see how rare these are. I mean, 40,000 people are killed driving cars in the United States every year. 30 to 40,000 people are killed, and like 2 million people are injured. I know. They come into our emergency room. We try to put them back together. So it's amazing how safe flying is on American branded aircraft. And it's amazing how safe our aircraft are. Extremely safe. So anyhow, this is really incredible. Of course, listed on here, you go back, there's a Miami flight where 18 people were killed. There's a corporate airline, British Jetstream crashed in 2004. A Beach 1900 where 19 people were killed in Charlotte. And then, of course, you've got the 2001, the 3 planes of 9/11 are listed here. So anyhow, flying commercial aircraft, American tagged planes especially, are extremely safe. It's just miraculous that millions of aircraft take off in the United States and land, and no one gets hurt or killed. It's just incredible safety record, and that's a tribute to these planes and how safe they are. But 80 to 90% of all these crashes are pilot error. So when we do have a plane crash, to just yell and suspect Boeing and to ground their planes is truly an incomplete overreach, in my opinion, and is really ridiculous. Donald Trump is, yesterday, he was in Lima, Ohio. He was at a tank plant where they build tanks for our military. And these rallies are incredible. In this Fox News article, I'll read, members of the Americans' largest auto workers union are paying too much in dues, President Trump said. His speech, the president criticized the leadership of the UAW and called on them to lower the membership fees of the organization's 400,000 members. Trump's remarks at the Joint Systems Manufacturing Center in Lima, Ohio, known as the Lima Army Tank Plant, also referred to the idling of General Motors plant in Lordstown last year. Lordstown is in eastern Ohio, about 193 miles east of Lima. And so, anyhow, so he said they could have kept that gorgeous plant. Lower your dues, lower your dues. Donald Trump is putting a lot of pressure on the unions, and he should be, okay? The General Motors CEO, she said that she had to close this plant in Lordstown because of the unions. Okay. Now, I know there's a tit for tat going on back and forth, right? But Donald Trump has just been so adamant about, fighting for these types of manufacturing jobs. Remember when Barry Obama said that, well, what are you going to do? You're going to wave a magic wand? Make these jobs just reappear? These manufacturing jobs are lost. Barry told us that they're never coming back. And so who would thought that Donald Trump talking about bringing manufacturing back to the United States, he was mocked at and they made such a big deal. This is not the 1950s anymore. This is, those days are long gone. Look how Donald Trump has really fought for these manufacturing jobs. And he has brought many of these manufacturing jobs back to the United States. This is incredible. This is great for the middle class. Many of these people are really embedded in their communities with their parents, with their family members. It's really difficult for these families to go ahead and move and to a new plant and to a new job. So Donald Trump, I think, is just, I give him a high five here for just incredibly fighting for the American worker and bringing these plants back. I remember I used to drive a Volkswagen. It was built in Puebla, Mexico. Okay, Donald Trump is really now, Chattanooga, Tennessee, they're building Volkswagens. They're building the Volkswagen Atlas now. They build the Passat in Chattanooga. I love this. I love that Donald Trump is giving lip service to these jobs. I love how he's pressuring the CEO of General Motors to quickly get this plant open or to sell it so someone else can build cars at that plant. So Donald Trump is really fighting for jobs. And, you know, what better thing to fight for people, especially the middle class and the lower class. Unemployment is at an all-time low right now. This is just amazing. Donald Trump will be reelected easily, I believe, if unemployment continues to stay so low and the economy continues to do so well. It's just awesome. Let's look at, for fun, let's look at Donald Trump. Let's see what he's been tweeting about. He tweeted about this Ukrainian plot. I mean, this is really amazing. Of course, we've been so focused on the Bob Mueller special counsel thing, that the Russians were colluding with our election of 2016. Okay, so there's no evidence. There's no evidence. The Russians were sending money, doing ads against Donald, but then also against Hillary, and both ways. So there's no evidence that the Russians interfered significantly, changed the votes, the outcome of our election. Good grief, the United States were involved on all these other international elections. And this, to think that we're not, it's just ridiculous. Remember Barry Obama waving his finger at the people in Great Britain, don't Brexit, you go to the back of the line if you Brexit, So, I mean, look how involved Barry was in the politics at the UK. So this is a Hill article talking about, as Russian collusion fades, Ukrainian plot to help Clinton emerges. So now they're starting an investigation in the Ukraine, and they have records of influencing and trying to help Hillary Clinton get elected. Also, they're talking about that the Paul Manafort situation, it's the Ukrainians who leaked that information, okay, to the Americans, to the Democrats, to get Paul Manafort, who was working for Donald Trump. So anyhow, this is just another piece of the onion here. There's so much that we don't know about in 2016, and the focus has been all on the Republicans. It was interesting to note that Bob Mueller is finally, there's a Democrat who got ensnared by his investigation who's in trouble. So anyhow, Donald Trump is excitedly tweeting about that. He also tweeted the reason he quotes Kennedy Nation last night. He said, the reason we have the special counsel investigation is that James Comey, a dirty cop, leaked his memos to a friend who leaked them to the press on purpose. Okay, totally illegal. This is so true. This is so true that this whole investigation was illegal. And so anyhow, let's never forget who Bob Mueller works for and the constitutionality of these special counsels. Anton Scalia was just totally opposed to this. Congress cannot go and arrest the President of the United States, right? We have a balance of powers. Congress can't go and just throw out all the Supreme Court's justices out in the street. No. The Supreme Court can't do the same thing to Congress or the President. Congress does have the power to throw the President out by impeaching him. Oh, yes. If they have the votes, they can impeach the President and kick him out of office, convict him in the Senate and boot him out. Yes, they can do that. But otherwise, they can't really touch the President of the United States. They can't do that. Bob Mueller and this whole special counsel, all the power of this investigation comes within the Article 2 powers of the president. But Bob Mueller, his boss in this is the president of the United States, is Donald Trump. Donald Trump. That's why the Democrats go, oh, Trump, you better not fire him. You better not fire him. Because they're worried about him firing him because he can. Because Donald can do that. Donald's letting it play out. He knows this is the court of public opinion. He doesn't want to give fodder to the Democrats. And he's letting it play out. So I love it. I love it. Donald defends his Twitter usage. I love it. People are so critical of Donald Trump and his Twitter usage. This is just retarded. You know, they say, even conservatives say, oh, I wish he wouldn't tweet so much. Well, why not? Why not? He is such a hard fighter. This Meghan McCain thing is really fascinating. Remember shows ago, Donald Trump will defend his character immediately, fiercely. So if you criticize Donald Trump, be prepared. You better be ready because he is going to come back at you and he's going to be tough. He defends his character. He always does. So when John McCain, when the news again, we all kind of knew this, but when we found out for sure that John McCain was the one who took the fake Michael Steele dossier, the dossier of the prostitutes urinating on Barack Obama's bed that he slept in Moscow. It's a ridiculous story. This fake opposition research made up stuff by Michael Steele, who admitted to making this up. This was given to, James Comey had this. He got this from Bruce Orr, who got it from Nellie Orr, his wife, who worked at Fusion GPS, who HRC paid for. So James Comey goes to President Trump and goes, hey, well, you heard about this dossier, you know. And then him and James Clapper, I mean, these people are just deep state or horrible people going against a sitting president. And they mention this to Donald, and Donald goes, well, this is trash. This is ridiculous. And then what do? They give it to John McCain. Go, yeah, well, now the president knows about it. Now you can report on it. Now you can report that the president was debriefed on this. I mean, this was such a setup job. You know, it was the media. It was the collusion of James Clapper, James Comey, John McCain. Oh, that's right. I kind of got that messed up. John McCain gave this to James Comey. He gave it to the FBI. So it has some credibility. It's coming from a Republican senator. Oh, John McCain. So when Meghan McCain says, oh, you know, Donald Trump will never be a great man, and that when she says that he would think it was, that her dad would think it was hilarious that the president was so jealous of him. Okay, what is she going to expect? Donald Trump is going to fight back. And that's what Donald Trump does. So anyhow, I love it. I love it that yesterday Donald Trump, he showed the maps of the caliphate. This is on his Twitter feed. I mean, people who are opposed to Donald Trump's Twitter should follow his Twitter instead of gripe about it. Talks about the caliphate and how before they're all over Iraq and Syria. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, they had lots of territory. Now in 2019, it's an itty bitty little speck. And Donald said, like, by this evening, that should be gone. I'm sure those people are listening carefully in their tents for any kind of drone noises coming their way. I love it. Donald Trump is winning on so many different areas. That's when my friend says that, why, you know, I don't even think Donald should run for re-election. I mean, this is just retarded. We're winning on so many different fronts. I love it. And not to mention the Supreme Court. So it's just amazing. Oh, guess what? Comrade Cortez's, her unfavorable ratings are skyrocketing. Okay. With most people viewing her negatively. Now, to her credit, she is excellent in getting tons of publicity. But a lot of this publicity, or people are finding out more and more about her, they don't like her. Now, of course, the leftists just love this nonsense. They love this socialist kind of talk. They love her Green New Deal. Most of these people, they want government to run everything. I mean, they want power. And so the Green New Deal will give them this power. I mean, she's 29 years old, freshman congresswoman. And for the main contenders in the Democrat presidential primary, support all this nonsense. They're just lock and step with this. This is really fascinating. But anyhow, and she does have brilliant people who recruited her and told her how to run and got her elected. But when she's just in front of the cameras, you can tell that she's really pretty much an empty suit. She really has no idea what she's talking about. So anyhow, her negativity continues to mount, which is good. Because her ideas are terrible. The Green New Deal it would be a catastrophe. No, well, we wouldn't have to worry about plane crashes anymore because no more planes. Okay. I mean, basically, tear down all the buildings and have to rebuild them in some kind of energy efficient way. I love what Dennis Prager says about the people with the environment and climate change and everything. And really, he said there's really just one question you need to ask to figure out where people stand on this climate change panic. You ask them if they support nuclear power. Ask them about nuclear power. Because anyone who's worried about CO2, causing the greenhouse gas effects of CO2, they will support nuclear power because it's really the only answer to decrease CO2 emissions. And so, but for some reason, the left is against nuclear power. They hate it. They say it's a non-renewable energy source. They hate it. The hippies, they don't like nuclear power. But really, nuclear power is the true energy source where there's no CO2 produced. It's just so true. So anyhow, that is the end of that. I did listen today on my run a PragerU video about climate change and how the models cannot even predict none of the climate change models can even predict what has already happened. So they can't predict the future. Mentioned there was Hurricane Irene, I think it was, where they thought this 2 days before the hurricane was coming into Florida, and they predicted it was going to hit Miami. Well, it did not hit Miami. It went around and hit the west coast of Florida. So we cannot, he uses the argument that we can't even predict hurricanes where they're going to hit 2 days before they hit. That how are we going to predict, the climate? There's so many different variables. It's just very hard to predict. He says it's second only to the complexity of the human brain. He uses water as an example, with our water being in our oceans and in our atmosphere and forming clouds, to try to have a computer model of just the dynamics of water on the earth it's just incredibly complicated and has not been achieved. I wanted to mention here, a friend sent me this article from Breitbart. Facebook apologizes for labeling White House social media director Dan Scavino a bot. Okay. I mean, this is incredible. Okay. The platforms, Facebook, Twitter, once they remember, you might remember when these platforms came out, that your timeline was chronological. It was chronological. Okay, so there was no sorting of the feeds. Your Facebook, when people posted, when your friends posted, it went right on your Facebook feed. But once they change the timeline, they can manipulate everything. I have friends who have Donald Trump on notification, and not even all of his tweets will come through. So they are totally manipulating these platforms, okay? And they have openly said that they don't want bad stuff on these platforms. And what is bad stuff to them? Many of them, Donald Trump is this Hitler-type guy, this misogynist, racist, bigoted, homophobic, Islamophobic person, and they feel like just speech is an aggression, that it's violence, not maybe even a microaggression, a big aggression. And so they, look at this, the conservatives get squished on these type of platforms. And how often do the liberals or the leftists, how often do they accidentally, Facebook thinks they're a bot and bans them or shadow bans them? Oh, I just can't even think of I don't even have an example right now. So it's too bad. It's too bad that these platforms, these open platforms, kind of they used to be like the telephone company, just carrying information from one person to the next. No, they are now publishers. And now they are editing out content. The shooter in New Zealand, people were outraged that he was live streaming that and the platforms couldn't close that down. I mean, we need to prepare ourselves for speech that is offensive, that we don't like. This is the whole purpose of the First Amendment, is to allow free and open discourse. And it's too bad that the left is so afraid to debate anything. They will shut you down. They will call you a racist, and therefore they don't want any kind of debate. Conservatives can't even go to these campuses to give talks. They are shut down. It's just incredible. It reminds me, I saw that at Emory University, the lady who ran for governor, now I'm blanking on her name. She gave the Democrat response to Donald Trump's State of the Union speech. Well, I'm blanking on her name, but she was beat by Kemp she ran for governor of Georgia, and she lost. And yet, she celebrated. So Emory University has her coming in, and they've given her awards. Oh, I think she's speaking at the commencement. And they say she's just wonderful and all these great things. They never mention in this big, long bio that she lost in her run for governor of Georgia. As a matter of fact, I don't even think she's admitted defeat. So I think she does think she is the governor. I mean, talking about ignoring the will of the people in Georgia is really funny. I want to close on a nice thought. I try to do this with this podcast, and I was listening to a PragerU video on lots of them on my run this morning, and one of them was on Abraham Lincoln and his Gettysburg address. And it reminds me that I do have largely a public education, K through 12. Kindergarten through third grade, I went to Prairie Elementary in Kansas City. It's in Johnson County, Mission Hills. Very nice suburb, very nice elementary school, public. And then we moved over across the state line. My parents got divorced. My mom remarried, and we moved into Missouri, into my stepdad's parents' house. Very nice. And then we went to a public school on the Missouri side, not so great. Okay. And I retook, it was fourth grade. I retook third grade over at Prairie Elementary. It was traumatizing for me. They held me back because I'm a July birthday and I was the youngest kid in the class. And they held me back so I'd be the oldest kid in the class. I guess I was so immature. They thought that would help me. But I lost all my friends, and I had to make new friends, and people said I flunked, and they made fun of me. Oh, I was totally out of control, getting in trouble all the time. We actually had one of the first Black Americans, African American teachers at Prairie Elementary, Mrs. Bettis. She was really sweet, but I was terrible because I was so bored because I was repeating the grade, and she was teaching all the same stuff that I learned the previous year. And so I was just obnoxious and got in trouble. I'm sorry, Mrs. Bettis. I was such a brat kid. Then we moved into over in the Missouri side after the divorce, and my mom remarried. And we, my sister and I, little sister and I, went to an elementary school over there, Bryant Elementary School. Well, the teachers went on strike, and we had to go to school in the summertime, no air conditioning. Oh, it was awful. We hated it. It was terrible. Well, my parents, my stepdad, actually went to a prep school at Kansas City, Missouri, and Pembroke Country Day School. And so my parents, after the strike, a lot of the parents of my friends, they said, oh, these public schools are terrible. And so I went to a private school for 2 years. It was great. Well, anyhow, the long lead up to this is that I had to memorize the Gettysburg Address. This is great. 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So it's amazing. Lincoln doesn't talk about the Constitution here. He goes right to the Declaration of Independence. In no other country on the face of the earth was started with this idea of this liberty and in this freedom and of equality with people. And then he talks about the Civil War and how these dead, the dedication of the dead had consecrated the land. He said, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. And he's so humble. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here. It's amazing. There's a guy who spoke before him for 2 hours. And Lincoln gave this in 2 minutes. The photographers couldn't even get pictures of him because he sat down, so quickly. He said, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. The war was still, of course, going on. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. You guys have a great day. This is Philip Koerper. This is the Philip Koerper Show. If you have any questions or things that you want me to address on my podcast or questions for me, fire away. On philkoerper.com, you can contact and leave questions there. Have a great day. You can subscribe on iTunes or watch the video on YouTube. Take care. Bye-bye.